Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chair Athletes Commission London 2012, Jonathan Edwards, and his guests, four-time Olympic champion and eight-time world champion sprinter and founder, Michael Johnson Performance, Michael Johnson, along with double Olympic champion, 1,500 meter and 800 meter, and founder, DKH Legacy Trust, Kelly Holmes.
Well, good morning, everybody. Great pleasure to be here this morning with you. Really looking forward to conversation. Well, amongst friends, really, because we competed together probably for a couple of decades. We want you to join the conversation as well as normal. The app is open for questions about the future of athletics. Later on, there is something called Ask a Champion. So if you want to ask personal questions, obviously about athletics, not just personal questions, you understand, to Michael and to Kelly, do it with the hashtag Ask a Champion. Now, I'm going to start with the last time that we all competed together. It was Magic Monday in Sydney in 2000. You got a gold medal. You got a bronze medal. I got a gold medal. Sorry, Kelly. You got two gold medals, didn't you, 4 years
Nearly.
later? So your memories of that night, Kelly?
Yeah, it was an amazing night. I mean, I think Sydney as a Games held a fantastic Olympics. And then, of course, the atmosphere in the stadium was electric. I think when one person has a great success, the energy that rubs off on all the other athletes certainly is kind of contributing factor to the successes.
And you, Michael, it was, as I said, probably the greatest night of track and field athletics?
It was incredible. Well, Sydney was just an incredible Games. And for me, it was doubly special. It was my last Olympics. I had already made the decision to retire after Sydney, so I knew that that was the end for me. And it was very special. And actually, in the 400 meters, I competed right after Kathy Friedman, so no one actually watched our race. Everybody was just focused on Kathy, and it was, I mean, even myself and the other 7 athletes in my heat. I mean, normally I'm focused on my race and only my race and oblivious to whatever else is going on. And even I lifted my head up to just see that. It was just fantastic to see her performance there at the home Olympics for her.
Yeah, I can remember getting people to try and clap on the back straight for my triple jump. Nobody was interested at all. It was like 3 people clapping. Fast forward 12 years to London, Super Saturday, 3 gold medals for Britain. And you'd think that the sport of athletics was in rude health. Nothing had changed much in 12 years. But here we are discussing the future of athletics. The supposition behind that is that the sport isn't in great shape. There are question marks about its future. What would you say to that kind of understanding of where athletics is at the moment?
Yeah, I do think that there are many question marks because almost athletics is hidden under the Olympic banner. When the Olympics comes on, athletics is a very high-profile sport. But outside of that, I think there's a lot of other sports that are matching in terms of professionalism for young people to get involved in certain sports. And for me, the future of any sport is who comes next. In athletics, it has its challenge where, as an individual sport, unless you've got those individuals that are encouraged at a young age to then have every other aspect around them to continue and focus on you as an individual. A lot, especially in Great Britain, are moving to sports that are becoming more supported in their network and the team around them. So cycling is becoming very professional in the UK, and a lot of youngsters, even though it's an individual sport, they see that the support network is there. Team sports are becoming a lot more profiled in the UK in particular, and I think across the world that young people are doing that. So for me, athletics will always have its place, but I think it's going to have its challenges going forward from here.
Michael, any student of history will tell you have to understand the past to have an idea of what will happen in the future. How have you seen the sport develop or indeed go into decline over the course of your career from what sort of early 80s, early 90s through to retiring in 2000, and now as a broadcaster working with BBC?
Yeah, I think, that's an interesting question, Jonathan, and I think it really sums up the major issue with athletics and why athletics is in such decline. Nothing has really happened over that period of time to change the sport and to engender itself to new fans and to a new generation of sports fans. Nothing has happened. There is a resistance within athletics as a sport to change and to modernize the sport. if you look at other sports, they're constantly looking at ways to make their sports more television friendly, and how they might engage the audience and fans with the sport. Athletics doesn't do that. And as a result, we continue to lose fans. If you don't have fans and you don't continue to grow your fan base, you lose television and you lose sponsorships, and that's what you're seeing with athletics.
So there is the modernisation issue. Clearly, we can't have a conversation about the future of athletics without talking about drugs. And let's go back to 1988 and to Ben Johnson. And I think there was an anniversary, I think just yesterday, I think getting his gold medal taken away. How much does that still resonate through the sport of athletics? Has it ever recovered from that?
I think the issue of drugs in athletics is always going to be there, unfortunately, because you've got that mixture of scientists ahead of the times of actually the doping control of authorities. And that's the unfortunate thing, because you've got that, the achievements which are going to bring, I suppose, the interest in the sport, then with the backfill of losing role models, having the issues surrounding the drugs affect a sport like athletics in particular. And that is the problem, because we get our superstars. Now, I think, personally, our sport has been held up by one person at the moment, Usain Bolt. It's pretty much that he is the superstar and he is Mr. Athletics. But athletics won't survive off of one champion. Then you create other champions, or effectively you do, and then, unfortunately, you find out that they're not participating in sport as sport should be, i.e. they're cheating. Then that has a detrimental effect again on our sports, and people lose credibility, and we just keep going on a cycle. And something has to change. Something dramatically has to change to say drugs in sport can no longer exist if we want to survive, and especially in athletics, in my eyes.
Michael, your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think, it's unfortunate, because that's the one area that I think that athletics has gotten it right. But we suffer from the fact that athletics has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to doping. There's no other sport. I mean, most other sports are not at the level. I mean, athletics has led when it comes to, and probably as a result of 1988 and of the Ben Johnson scandal, which did so much damage to the sport. And yes, the sport is still reeling from that, and we've had subsequent scandals that have only served to further cause doubt in the minds of sports fans in terms of the actual performances. But I think that because athletics has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to to doping, then we catch more people, and therefore there are more stories and there are more scandals in the sport than probably most other sports, and that's unfortunate. But at the same time, I think it's the right way, and I think that ultimately that will pay off for the sport in the future. But you're never going to. I would have to say, you're never going to have a situation where no one cheats. I mean, if you really, it's unrealistic. There are always going to be those people, just like there are those people in society who cheat. You always have to have law enforcement, right? Because someone's always going to have to try to cheat. The same thing.
But isn't that a shame, though,
athletics
for me?
is just a small microcosm of society. You're going to have people who are going to cheat.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because sometimes the sport of athletics is judged by different standards. You take Premiership football, and I know both my sons love it, and they see somebody diving for a penalty or handballing it and not owning up to it. And when it's their team, they think that's fine. That's okay. And yet, athletics,
Well, that's
super sensitive to it.
It's true, and it's. I can remember. So in the U.S. with baseball, I think you have to test positive something like 6 or 7 times before you're suspended for a year. But with baseball, there was with the Barry Bonds scandal with Balco, which a lot of athletes in different sports got caught up in. He was kind of the poster child for that scandal when it came to baseball. And there was an article where a reporter went out to the San Francisco Giants Stadium one day and just asked random sports fans, do you care if your heroes in baseball are doping or not? And overwhelmingly, they said, I don't care. I just want to watch the game, and I just want to see great performances. They don't care when it comes to those sports that have always been professional sports. Track and field, or athletics, is an Olympic sport. Society expects its Olympians to still hold true to those values that the Olympic movement stands for and the amateurism that the Olympic movement was founded on and that people still associate with athletics. And so there's a different standard, there's no doubt about it.
Do you think, Kelly, that people care enough about athletics as a sport now, the general public, it generates the same kind of excitement that perhaps it once did? And is a different situation in the UK from what it is in the US? Because athletes used to be like footballers. They were the big stars. And now they're kind of like, not quite also-rans, but not as popular.
I think it takes individuals to kind of capture the public's imagination. Certainly in the UK, when you have the likes of Jessica Ennis, who was probably high-profiled leading up to our own Olympic Games in our country. And people held on to that hope that we were going to come away with, a fantastic result. I do think that in the public's eye, athletics is diminishing in terms of the first sport they would think about really getting excited for. And that goes back down to the fact that we need more high-profile, successful, but almost personalities in sport. It goes back to what I said about Usain Bolt. He's more than just a fast runner. He is a personality who is kind of engaging with people, and actually we follow him because we want to see his antics at the end. We want to see the expression. We want to see everything else that goes with the fact that he's run a pretty quick time, and our expectations are becoming too high of one person. I do wonder whether, as Michael said, athletics has to change the way that we project it. It's the same thing. It's the same all the time. It's a championship. We have a set of competitions, whether that be jumps, throws, or runs. It's a heat semi-final. We're finishing on the set day, but there's no kind of real glamour and theatre around it. And actually, sometimes I think now we've kind of almost got to change that, because unless you are an athletics fan, will you continue to watch every other event? In football, how many thousands and thousands and thousands, around millions of people around the world watch a club? Watch some guys running around on a football pitch after a little ball. But you get athletics fans that might be interested in the 100 metres or the 200 metres, and that's it.
Well, you talk about modernisation and changing. I think it's an interesting one. It would be really good if you could put some ideas forward on the app about how you think athletics might modernise, and then towards the end of the session, we'll kind of go through them and you can give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down and see if there's anything else there. The other thing I wonder, Michael, is culturally whether there's an issue with athletics. Because let's face it, it's a really, really hard sport. You spend a lot of time out of the public eye, working incredibly hard on one very esoteric thing, whether it's running fast or jumping far. And that somehow doesn't resonate with young people in the way that perhaps excellence for excellence sake used to.
I don't think that it's much different from many other sports, though, in that respect. And we have to remember, it's unrealistic to compare athletics as a sport to any team sport. It's just, it's a completely different animal. I think, the problem with athletics, and I agree with you, Kelly, in terms of personalities, but I would say also, you can't just depend on personalities. What the sport needs is to it is the purest form of competition. Anyone will stop and watch two people race. Everybody's interested in that. Whether it's two people, whether it's two cars, whether it's two horses, people want to see a race. And we don't, and what has happened, what I've seen with the sport is a shift away from the competition and more onto the personalities and records as well. There's an obsession with records in athletics. Well, you're probably not going to see one. It's very difficult to break a world record, isn't it?
Yes.
We would know. But there's such a focus there, and not a focus just on the competition between the athletes, which is fascinating on its own. And so I think that's really where the problem lies.
The other thing which I think strikes me about athletics is it's impossible to replicate what your heroes do. Now, I can go and play golf, and I can hit 2 shots like Tiger Woods and want to keep coming back, and I can play tennis, I can hit a backhand like, well, not quite like Federer, but close to once, but I just can't do it all the time. Whereas you can't go out and run 3:56 for 1,500 meters and say, I felt like Kelly Holmes.
No, you're right. But I think that's almost the interest in sport. That's why sport is as it is. That's why people have dreams and aspirations to be Olympians, because they do see those exceptional achievements.
But it's so far away in athletics. I mean, that's my point. I mean, I say my son's going to go out in the garden and do an overhead kick and feel like Messi. But so they can't replicate what you guys did.
No, but I suppose that's what you don't want people just to be the same as everyone else. You want somebody else to come out and steal the thunder. And I think, Michael was right in terms of the fact that people are obsessed with records and they won't keep broken. And that's why I was saying that personality has to come in, because in our sport, there has to be a limit at some stage. Records are not going to continue to be broken. And if actually that was why people watched it, is because can somebody run faster than anyone ever run before? And if that doesn't happen, people lose interest. So you have to have something else around it at the moment in our sport to almost hide the fact that these records will not continue to be broken, because before that was the excitement when Michael stood on the track or you did your jumping, watching you do your world record, everybody's eyes was on the triple jump at that time. Everybody's eyes was on the triple jump. And not being funny, but in most arenas, triple jump isn't the favourite event. Right. So it does have to have somebody that is doing something astonishing for people to kind of actually open their eyes to, and that's not necessarily going to happen over the years in athletics in the next few years.
There was a discussion, I think it came from Sweden, that all records should be set back to 0 with the millennium, wasn't it? And obviously they're looking back to a different time, and some of the records in the books, we all know which ones they are.
It would have been great. I might have had a world record.
You might have had a world record, which perhaps were achieved with the help of pharmaceutical aids. Do you think there's an argument for that? I mean, we lose our records, Michael, so we don't like that. But for the greater good of the sport,
I don't think that's the solution. I think again, then you're gonna have to do the same thing again in the next 30 or 40 years. Because then records are going to tail off, and they're going to ultimately get to a point where they're not going to be broken. And so what do you do then? So again, I think that you don't want to be so focused on records. I think if you were to set all records back to 0, then you get people focused on records again and obsessed with those, as opposed to being focused on the competition.
So a question then, could we change it totally? Could you have 150, 250? Can we change the actual events and disciplines?
I honestly think I don't know if anyone in the sport, from an administrative standpoint, has ever really kind of polled to see what people are really interested in. So, in all honesty, are people really that interested in watching women's discus?
Any women's discus throws out there?
If so, don't throw a discus at me. But, there's an argument. There's a reason why you don't have the heptathlon and the decathlon, which are great events at the championship level. There's a reason why those events are not in the Grand Prix events. It doesn't fit. And how long does it take to run an entire athletics meeting with field events, distance events, sprint events, middle distance events? It takes far too long. It's a nightmare for television to package it. That's why we don't even televise it in the U.S. And when we do televise it in the U.S., it's a highlight package, basically. There's rarely any time you will ever see live athletics on television in the U.S. because it's just too hard to package. It's 4 sports wrapped up into one, and it's disjointed. It's like a 3-ring circus going on. People can't follow it. They're not interested.
Okay, so this comes on to the question which is up on the screen now, which has come from the audience. What changes does athletics make? What does, from what you've said, obviously the women's discus is not going to feature.
200 meters, that was my event. I'd take it out.
And it's gone out of the world indoors, hasn't it?
Yeah.
They don't have the 200
I would take it out.
So you'd start just pairing events
pair it back to the events that the majority of people are truly interested in. Not just athletics fans, but people who we'd like to bring into the sport. I mean, do you need a 3,000 steeplechase and a 5,000? Probably not.
No, that's a fair point. But you go back to your point, Kelly, and there are personalities that come out which will make an event. So it's not just necessarily about the event. I think of women's shot put with Valerie Adams, Valerie Billy, who's fantastic to watch. We all get excited by watching her, or the men's shot. So it's not necessarily just about events, is it? It's about personalities.
Yeah, I do. I think that's kind of what I was getting at. And you probably can do something quite creative with athletics, you know, because we have so much going on. You could package throws, and it might, for whatever reason, interest some people that are into power sports, you know, show the behind the scenes, the weightlifting. You see those things, those guys, you know, lift, you know, the amount of weights that those guys lift who are in those power sports, you know, actually maybe getting a bit behind the scenes of an athlete and the development of how good they become because of the training that they do. Maybe it just needs a little bit more history to a sport to actually engage people, because, you know, that is the challenge with athletics, because there's so much, there's so many disciplines to show. There will only be a handful of high-profile events that people really engage with. So maybe I certainly don't know the answer to this at all, and athletics has been going for years, but maybe there is an opportunity to change the way that we deliver the athletics as a package, you know, put the throws together, put the jumps together, put the track events together, and then see what the interest is across the board. But, you know, that's not probably our job to do that. That's going to be down to television. It's going to be down to public opinion, fans, and again, it comes down to individuals showcasing the sport, because unless you have, and it goes back to personalities, unfortunately, whether that's athletics or any sport, unless you have those that are drawing the crowds, those sports won't be on television and there won't be an interest in them.
I mean, it's an interesting tension. And if you look back to what the IAAF have done, the world governing body, with what was the Golden Four, which I thought was quite a successful format. I think it was Brussels, Zurich, Berlin, and Rome.
Yeah.
Four, with specifically chosen events around athletes. It then became the Golden Six, and now it's become the Diamond League, which is much more equitable to all events, but has lost some of its impact. So in a sense, you almost feel like, from what you're saying, Michael, is that the governing body of the sport has taken athletics backwards in terms of making it marketable.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right with the Golden Four, the Golden Six. That was a great event. People could follow it. It was very easy to follow. They've changed the format just about every year. They've tweaked it here and tweaked it there, and it's never been consistent. And so people aren't able to really, it hasn't been able to gain a real following because the format has changed so dramatically. When it's changed to the Diamond League, it became really difficult to follow. I mean, people generally don't understand. I follow the sport, and I don't even understand, how do you win the Diamond League? It's not a simple format. It doesn't really work. The Golden Four was almost like, you know, Grand Slams in tennis and golf. People knew that those big events were on the calendar, and they were interested in following them, and it made it much more attractive.
And something that you talked about, Kelly, to pick up on, this disconnect between every 4 years with the Olympic Games and the excitement that athletics creates, and then the comparison with a World Championships. So would it be difficult to change things every 3 years and then revert back to what is just the normal format for an Olympic Games in Olympic years? I mean, these are the questions that governing bodies wrestle with.
Exactly. I don't know. I think something does need to change in those years between, because obviously, as I said before, Olympics engages anybody. It doesn't matter. It's Olympics. It's something that we will all have a passion about. We'll all have some form of interest in because of our own histories, whatever it may be. And then the challenge is there too many events in between? You know, we have Commonwealth Games, European champs, World champs is every 2 years now. European champs is now coming to the same year as the Olympic Games. And almost you kind of wonder, because of course you have to have the spread of countries that are going to actually invest in putting those games on. Now some countries may not know the impact that championships is going to have. And if you don't get full stadia, that again loses interest. because you watch it on television. You know, it's quite boring watching an athletics meet on television when you see the stadium empty as well, to be honest, because you don't hear the excitement. You just think, well, no one's bothered, and you kind of just watch the one race that you want to. And I'm an athlete. You know, athletics was part of my life for so many years. I lived, eat, and breathed athletics, but I actually get bored watching it myself now, and that's not a good thing. You know, when someone like myself is saying, you know, it's kind of boring on television, so I think something needs to happen. I don't have the answers, but I think something needs to happen to jazz it up in between an Olympic Games cycle.
If there are any questions from the floor, please raise your hands. People are coming around with roving mics, and we will take a couple of questions. While you're making yourself known, if you do have a question. Michael, Kelly's mentioned Usain Bolt. We can't talk about the future of athletics without talking about Bolt. I mean, is he both a curse and a blessing to athletics, given how big a figure he is?
I mean, I can't see any negativity that you could actually get from, you could derive from Usain Bolt in the sport. I mean, he has brought so much attention to the sport. I don't think that it's been managed well. If I were the IAA, if I would have partnered with Usain Bolt, because he can bring so much attention to the sport, but what they've done is sat back and said, hey, we're fortunate to have him, and let's just, ride that for as long as we can. And knowing him the way that I do, I know that I'm certain that if they went to him and said, hey, we'd like to partner with you, not to promote Usain Bolt, but to promote the sport, he'd be all for it.
So this is why I say, is it a curse? Because you're sitting there in Monaco, and you're like, hey, it's all cool, we've got Usain Bolt, we don't need to change. Whereas in fact, when Bolt goes, it all goes down there.
But it'll never get all the way down there because you have the Olympics. That's the curse. It's the Olympic sport, and it's always going to be a premier Olympic sport, and they know that. If it weren't for the Olympics, the sport would be done. It would be gone. It would have just wiped off the face of the earth because it doesn't exist really in those 3 years in between, as you said, Kelly. So that's really the problem. It's not. I think that Usain Bolt, regardless, there's nothing that would have happened different if Usain Bolt had never come into the sport. They've just sat back in the same thing. I mean,
yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Question at the back there.
Good morning. My name's Simon Beckett. I'm representing Coventry University. My question's about para-athletics. There hasn't actually been any discussion of the disabled version of the sport. First of all, how do you think that can be developed? And secondly, how much of a setback do you think Oscar Pistorius' scandal has been for that brand of the sport?
Fascinating question. Kelly?
Personally, I think Paralympics is doing better than Olympics in terms of the public perception. Last year, in 2012, I mean, I suppose I'm quite biased, obviously, being from Britain, but I think we delivered, exposed, and celebrated the best ever Paralympics event ever. And that in the stadium was probably the most talked about, watched event all time. When I saw people in the public walking around, they were emotionally attached to the Paralympics because for once it was given its platform. You never can compare the two, but I think certainly from a Paralympics perspective, having that platform last year really opened the eyes of the public imagination to give people an opportunity and chance who are by far just exactly the same. They are incredible talent, work extremely hard, and for once given a profile and a platform to succeed and to show who they are and what they do. And actually the stories behind them become secondary. They add to the achievements. For Oscar, I don't think Oscar's kind of damaged Paralympic sport because it's kind of not connected as the way drugs is. You know, for me, I don't think that's damaged. Yes, he was a profiled sport because he'd been profiled prior to, but for me, I think it's changed since 2012, and maybe that's just my own perception, but I think that that sport has, or Paralympic movement has changed, because we're certainly putting it on the platform. I'm not sure worldwide, and that's my worry.
I think Rio's,
Are we doing enough worldwide?
Rio's a good place for it to go next
Yeah.
with Alan Oliveira.
I hope so.
One last question over there quickly, because we're just out of time.
Hi, my name is Debbie. Just want to say real quick, thank you, Michael, all three of you. You've been great example and great role models for my sport. I have a quick question where, in the sense of, I'm a big fan of Usain Bolt. However, what is your recommendation where you have, for example, at a Diamond League event, you have an A, a B, and a C final, and we know, okay, the B and C final is a possibility where you're not being paid because you're not a part of the top 8. And also, if you have a race where Mr. Bolt is winning and he's there, we know once he's there, he's being paid X amount of money. However, you have 7 other supporting stars who possibility of a last place in a professional, this is your job, you know, may not be paid, or you may get $1,000 or $500. What's your recommendation, you know, to the IAAF to try and, you know, to change that? I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Miss Debbie Ferguson.
Miss Debbie
isn't it?
Ferguson, yeah.
Double Commonwealth champion from Manchester.
Yep, Bahamas.
No, I take your point, Debbie, and I think you're on to something there. I think, so first of all, yeah, you saying it's getting X amount, it's a lot of X's. A lot of X's. And he's well deserving of that. And I would say that anyone who takes the approach that, well, Usain Bolt shouldn't be making as much money as he is, I would disagree. He's the draw. He should be making the money that he's well worth it. The problem is the sport. This sport has suffered from the very beginning in that it never fully made a real transition from amateur to professional. It was always stuck somewhere in the middle. And that's been a big problem for the sport for many years. And so what has happened now is you've seen even more of a disconnect or a void in the middle. So just like any society won't survive without a middle class, that's the problem with athletics. There's no middle class. You have a few athletes at the very top making very, very good money, and they're professional athletes in every sense of the word. And then you have now most of the athletes, and this wasn't the case when we were competing. You had athletes who were championship medalists, not gold medalists and not superstars, but championship medalists did very well financially in the sport. They got appearance fees. Their appearance fees were healthy. They had contract sponsorships. Now you don't have that. If you're not one of the superstars in the sport, you don't get an appearance fee to show up. You only get prize money, and it is very, very low, and it's gotten even lower. That's a big problem.
Okay, last question for me, and it's a very quick answer because it's just one number. If 0 is terminal and 10 is in perfect health, where is athletics?
4.
4.
Yeah, 4.
4 agreement.
4.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Johnson and Kelly Holmes.